dear Bagginses and Boffins.
I was gonna
Yeah,
say,
so-
no sign of Tom Bombadil in this. So
Well, I mean, unclear.
maybe that's why everyone's displeased.
No. If you go to scene, 10 seconds in, I think that's Tom Bombadil.
Him and Goldberry.
Yeah. Yeah. So the other thing I guess we gotta bring up. I don't care about this at all, but some people do, and that is different races being in this of like not
Well,
fantasy
It is-
races, but real world races.
I know what you mean. Actually, I just saw in theaters the other day, the Tragedy of Macbeth. That's the Joel Coen's
Mhm,
remake.
Yeah.
And they got Denzel Washington playing Macbeth, and Macduff's also played by a black guy. It's like, whoa.
Was
That
it jarring?
doesn't seem authentic. Because I didn't know anything about the film before I went in, right? I just oh, it's Shakespeare. Yeah, I'll go. But it wasn't jarring, but it was just kind of surprising. um, and then The Witcher did that too. They had a little black elf as well.
Oh, did
which
they?
I
Okay,
thought-
I'm not caught up on the Witcher.
That was the first season. The elf that kind of runs away with the princess.
That's
yeah,
an elf? Oh my god, I'm not paying attention to that shit. I
Yeah,
have no idea what the heck is
was
going
an
on.
elf. Yeah.
I know there's a
Uh,
hunchback that turns into oh
A witch. Yeah, she's a. But anyway, The Witcher has experimented with having different races of elves. You have kind of a different skin tones.
yeah.
Just put it that way.
Yeah, and I used to not really know how I stood on this because this all kind of started way back when like the Little Mermaid was gonna have a black actress play her in the live action Little Mermaid, and there's a big uproar about that. And at the time, I was kind of like, I can kind of see their point about how it like really doesn't make sense when you think about it. But then I was like, wait a minute, we're talking about like a fantasy creature here. That like, how do we know how their pigmentation works? Like,
Well, yeah.
like deep sea creatures, like they're not all white or see through. Some of them are darker. So like, you know what I mean? Like there's no there is no scientific data other than humans to back that up. So like all we can kind of look at is how have we humans developed our pigmentation.
But anyway, when I saw the Macbeth thing, there's a documentary series, Louis Theroux does a lot of documentaries for the BBC, and there's one where he meets a bunch of kind of the Black Panther type people in the U.S. and interviews them, and he comes across this radical group that's like, they think like a lot of historical figures are actually black. Like they think Henry VIII was a black man and things like that. So when I
Wait,
saw
what?
it, yeah, well, don't. It doesn't make any sense, but don't
Okay.
worry about it. but when they had Macbeth played by Denzel Washington and Macduff played by a black guy as well, my mind went to that group. I'm like, hey, they'd love this. They
Yeah.
think that this is what's accurate.
Interesting. I never would have guessed that. That's interesting. But yeah, like I'm fine with it. I don't see anything wrong with it. The one thing I will say is that there's certain races in Lord of the Rings are racist. So one thing I
could-
would be curious is if you had some elves that were black or some dwarves that were black, would there be racism within their society or not? Would be my question.
Yeah.
And so that's also a part of my criticism of the Wheel of Time is that I'm fine with having, because I have no idea about the Wheel of Time, but from what I can tell, the writer actually did intend it to be a mixed race cast in the books. At least that's from what I've read and heard people talk about. But the problem is there's no racism in the show, and not that I want racism, but it adds a level of realism that you get in
Right.
the original
And
trilogy.
I don't have a problem with the idea of it. I mean, it's conceivable. I mean, skin tone, it corresponds with the region of the Earth you're in, with more the sunlight levels. So it would make sense that dwarfs or elves and dwarves that live near the equator would also have darker skin.
Yeah, exactly.
So I don't have a problem with it in terms of how it fits. But yeah, you're right. Would there be racism within the races?
See, I think there would be. Maybe not with the dwarves. The dwarves seem pretty chill with each other. But humans, definitely. And elves, I think, yes. And I mean, so you get very little insight into elf and dwarf culture other than a handful of scenes in the original trilogy. And really, dwarf culture, you get almost none. It's really just what you gain from Gimli's offhanded comments.
Yeah.
But there's a scene when they are at the Council of Elrond and they're sitting around, and I think it's Gimli, but it might be just some other random dwarf that yells like, "I'll never see the ring in the hands of an elf."
Yes.
That you need that. Like, that adds so much realism to it, because otherwise there's just something flat about arguments where they are all like cool with each other.
Especially a white elf.
So yeah, I'm fine with the different real world races playing different characters, as long as it's a little bit consistent. That's my only thing. Like, it wouldn't make sense for, like, say you have two groups of elves, and for them both to be completely mixed, and even though they live on completely opposite sides of the world and hate each other. To me, that there's something weird there. Like the color is partly why we're in real life racist. So to not add that into it would kind of feel weird, but maybe there's an explanation there that we might be able to figure out. But to me, that's my only concern, is that it's going to be a little bit too, like they're almost going to make it seem like, let's try to have zero racism. Isn't this so much better? Which I agree it is, but it takes away that layer of realism that helps you really immerse yourself in the story. Because, yeah, I don't want elves and dwarves to be racist, and that's actually part of the really fun journey that Gimli and Legolas go on, is that they learn the stigma and stereotypes of the racism that they were taught are stupid, and that they become best friends. And it's a really heartwarming journey that those characters go on. So if you take that away, I think you lose a lot to the original trilogy if you immediately get rid of all sorts of stereotyping of, even though they're fantasy races, but just if you're trying to show like a perfect world with no racism, you lose the realism of the fantasy that you're trying to bridge the real world with the fantasy to do like a bit of a character study on that. And so I think you need it. But yeah, I'm cool with anyone playing whatever. I think I've seen, even in Tolkien's lore, there are some like darker skinned hobbits and darker skinned dwarves. I don't know about elves. Maybe that's where people are getting upset about that. But even if there isn't anything in Tolkien's lore and background, I wouldn't care too much if they added to it. Like, Peter Jackson didn't go exactly by the book for certain things, and he made the right choices when he made changes. So, yeah.
I regret to announce this is the end. I bid you all a very fond farewell.